Sometimes, the most painful betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from your own blood. I trusted my daughter with everything, but one careless mistake exposed her plan, a plan so cruel it shattered my entire life. I was sitting alone in my living room, the soft ticking of the old clock filling the silence of the house. My laptop was open on the table, a cup of lukewarm tea next to it. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had returned home earlier than usual from my weekly church group, too tired to stay for the full session. I thought no one knew I was back. As I sank into the armchair, I heard the faint sound of my daughter's voice echoing from the other room. At first, I thought she was on a call with one of her friends. She often locked herself in her room to talk, sometimes laughing, sometimes whispering like a teenager hiding secrets, though she was already a grown woman. But something felt different this time. Her voice was louder than usual, confident, almost cold. I frowned, noticing her laptop had been left in the kitchen earlier, open on the counter. Out of curiosity, I walked toward it and realized her video call was still connected. She hadn't muted herself. I froze when I heard her say, "Don't worry, Mom has no clue. She trusts me completely. By the time she realizes what I've done, it'll be too late." My heart stopped. The words pierced through me like glass. I leaned closer, making sure I wasn't imagining things. On the other end of the call, I could faintly hear a man's voice, calm and calculating. He asked, "And you're sure she won't question it?" My daughter chuckled, a laugh I had never heard from her before. Sharp, bitter. She's so naive. She thinks I'm helping her manage everything out of love. But soon, she'll have nothing left. Not the house, not the money, nothing. She won't even know what hit her. I felt my knees weaken. My own daughter, the girl I had raised with trembling hands after her father died, the girl I had sacrificed my dreams for, was plotting against me. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Memories flooded me. Nights when she was sick, and I stayed awake at her bedside. Years of double shifts just to put food on the table. The endless moments when I chose her happiness over my own. And now, here she was, talking to someone about stripping me of everything I had left. I wanted to storm into her room, scream at her, demand answers. But something in me stopped. Instead, I forced myself to stay silent. My breath was shaky, my hands trembling, but my mind whispered, "No, don't let her know you heard this. Not yet." So, I quietly closed her laptop, pretending nothing had happened. But inside, a storm was brewing. My daughter thought she had fooled me. But now, for the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to be the weak, trusting mother she believed me to be. And that was the moment her own mistake became the beginning of my revenge. For the rest of that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every word I had overheard echoing inside my head. She'll have nothing left. It played like a broken record. And the more I thought about it, the more it twisted my insides. I kept asking myself if I had misunderstood. Maybe she was talking about someone else. Maybe it wasn't even serious. But the laughter, that bitter, mocking laughter, it wasn't the voice of a daughter protecting her mother. It was the voice of a stranger, one who had grown close enough to stab me without blinking. I turned to the other side, pulling the blanket tightly around me. But even then, I could almost hear her voice through the thin walls. I wondered if she knew that her careless mistake had already exposed her. She moved around the house as if everything was normal the next morning. She greeted me with a faint smile, made herself some coffee, and chatted about the weather as if nothing had happened. I studied her carefully, noticing the way she avoided my eyes, the way her phone never left her hand, the way she seemed distracted when I spoke. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked casually as she sat at the counter scrolling through her phone. She looked up quickly, almost too quickly. "Yeah, Mom. Just tired. Didn't sleep much last night." I forced a smile. Me neither. For a moment, our eyes met, and I swear there was something there, something sharp, almost offensive. But then she looked back down at her phone, ending the exchange. I turned away, pretending not to care, but inside, I was watching every single detail. Over the next few days, I began to quietly observe her routines. She started going out more often, claiming she had errands or that she was meeting friends. Sometimes she came home late, and when I asked her where she had been, she'd shrug it off with vague answers. Just at the coffee shop. Went for a drive. Met Lisa, you know her. But when I asked specific questions, what coffee shop, which street, what time, she would hesitate, stumble over her words. I never pushed too hard. I didn't want her to know I suspected anything. Instead, I started taking mental notes. I watched the way she carefully placed her handbag in her room the second she came home. I noticed how she locked her bedroom door when she was inside. And I noticed how she always lowered her voice when she spoke on the phone, even if it was late at night. One evening, she left her laptop open in the living room again while she went to take a shower. My heart pounded as I glanced at the screen. It wasn't muted this time, it was off, but several tabs were still open. Most of them seemed harmless. Shopping websites, social media, a recipe page. But one tab stood out, an email inbox. I hesitated. My hands trembled. I told myself I had no right to read my own daughter's emails. But then another thought struck me. She has no right to destroy me behind my back. Slowly, I moved closer. The inbox was filled with unread messages, but my eyes landed on one subject line in bold. Contract details. Before I could click, I heard her footsteps approaching. I quickly stepped back, pretending to adjust the flowers in the vase. She walked in, her hair damp, her robe tied loosely around her waist. "What are you doing, Mom?" she asked casually. "Just fixing these flowers." They were leaning. I smiled, forcing calm into my voice. She nodded slowly, her eyes flicking to the laptop. She picked it up quickly and took it with her to her room. That little action told me everything I needed to know. She was hiding something. The following morning, I decided to test her. At breakfast, I casually said, "I was thinking of meeting with our lawyer next week. Just to review the house papers and bank accounts. It's been years since I checked." She froze mid-bite. Her fork hovered in the air. "Why? Everything's fine, isn't it?" I pretended not to notice her reaction. "Oh, of course. Just thought it would be good to update things. You never know when you might need them." She forced a laugh. "You're overthinking. Relax, Mom. I can handle all that for you. You don't need to bother." That was a confirmation I didn't want but needed. Why would she want to handle things so badly? Why did she sound almost desperate to keep me away from it? That night, I stayed awake long after she had gone to bed. I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, waiting. Around midnight, I heard her door creak open. She walked past my room quietly, clutching her phone. I followed her silently down the hallway, my slippers muffling my steps. She went into the backyard and began talking on the phone in a hushed tone. "I told you she suspects something," she whispered urgently. "She mentioned the lawyer today. But don't worry, I'll handle it. She's weak. She won't fight back." The man's voice on the other end was hard to make out, but I heard enough. "We need to move faster then. The paperwork won't hold forever. Make sure she signs soon. Don't let her change her mind." I clutched my chest, every word cutting deeper. Paperwork. Sign. Faster. They were planning to take everything. My house, my savings, my security. And she was working with him, whoever he was, to make sure it happened. I tiptoed back to my room, my mind racing. Rage bubbled inside me, but alongside it came fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of facing the truth. That my daughter wasn't just careless or confused. She was deliberately betraying me. The next day, I decided to play my part differently. I greeted her warmly, asked her about her day, even let her think I was as naive as ever. But inside, I was already planning. I didn't know yet how I would stop her, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let her see me as the weak, blind woman she thought I was. And then, something happened that changed everything. A letter arrived in the mail, a thick envelope with my name on it. At first, I thought it was junk, but when I opened it, my hands nearly gave way. Inside was a notice from the bank, informing me that my signature had been used to request a transfer of a large portion of my savings. The problem was, I had never signed anything. I stared at the paper in disbelief, and then at the corner, I noticed something chilling. The signature was mine, perfectly mine. Only it wasn't. Someone had copied it. So, well, that it looked identical. My blood ran cold. My daughter wasn't just planning. She had already begun. For hours I sat frozen with that letter in my hands, staring at the neat, forged lines of my own name. My stomach twisted as I thought about all the years I had trusted her with the simplest things. Grocery money, helping me sort bills, even running errands to the bank when my legs felt too weak. And now I wondered, how long had she been practicing my signature? How many nights had she sat in her room, copying every curve of the letters, while I thought she was simply chatting with her friends? I didn't confront her. Not yet. That would have been too easy for her. She would deny. She would lie. She would cry and hug me and say it was a mistake, and maybe a part of me would even believe her. No, I couldn't risk that. I had to be smarter, calmer, more patient. The next morning, I quietly slipped the letter back into its envelope and hid it beneath the cushions of the sofa. When my daughter came down the stairs, her hair neatly tied, a sweet smile plastered on her face, I felt my chest tighten. She sat across from me, buttering her toast as if she hadn't already stolen from me. "Mom, do you want me to go pick up your prescription today?" she asked casually. I nodded, forcing my lips into a smile. "That would be nice of you." She sipped her coffee, her eyes darting briefly to my face. "You look tired. Did you sleep?" "Not much," I admitted. Her smile widened faintly. "You should take better care of yourself. You worry too much." And in that moment, I wondered, was she mocking me? Did she know that I knew? Or was she simply enjoying the performance of pretending to be the caring daughter while plotting how to push me out of my own life? When she left, I called the bank directly. My hands trembled as I explained the letter I had received. The woman on the phone asked me a few questions, her voice polite but sharp, and then said, "Ma'am, according to our records, you signed the transfer request in person last week." "In person?" I repeated, my throat tightening. "I've never been there in weeks. That's impossible." There was a pause. The request was processed at our downtown branch. The signature matched perfectly. I felt the room spin. Can I come in to see the documents myself?" "Yes, of course," the woman replied. "But you'll need to bring identification, and I suggest you come as soon as possible." That afternoon I went. My legs ached as I climbed the steps of the bank, but I pushed myself forward. Inside, the clerk handed me a folder with copies of the transfer request. My name was there, my signature flawless, but the date and time stamped at the bottom made my skin crawl. That day, I remembered clearly. I had been at home all afternoon. I hadn't stepped out once. I looked up at the clerk. "Do you have security cameras in the lobby?" "Yes, ma'am, but we can't share that footage without legal authority." My lips pressed tightly together. I thanked her and left, the papers clutched against my chest. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the glass door, an older woman, tired, worn, eyes brimming with quiet rage. And I whispered to myself, "She thinks I'm weak. She thinks I won't fight. She's wrong." That night, I tested her again. I sat at the dining table with the folder beside me, flipping through it as if casually. When she walked in, she froze for a fraction of a second, her eyes locking on the papers. "What's that, Mom?" she asked, her voice steady, but her fingers clenched around her phone. "Oh, nothing much," I said lightly. "Just some bank documents. They asked me to review them. Seems like a transfer was made with my name on it." Her face paled. "What? That's strange. Maybe it's a mistake." "Maybe," I replied calmly, closing the folder. "But I'll get to the bottom of it." She laughed nervously, waving her hand. "Don't stress over it. You know how banks mess up sometimes." I smiled faintly, but inside I burned. Her voice carried too much false calm, too much eagerness for me to drop the subject. Later that night, I heard her again. She was on the phone in her room, her voice sharp, urgent. She found the papers. She went to the bank. "No, she doesn't know everything yet, but she's suspicious. We need to move faster." I pressed my ear against her door, holding my breath. The man's voice on the other end was muffled, but clear enough. "Then get her to sign the power of attorney. Without that, we can't touch the house. Do it soon. Don't waste time." My hands trembled against the wooden door. Power of attorney. She wanted me to hand over the rights to everything. My home, my security, my only shelter. The next morning, she came to me with a bright smile, holding a stack of papers. "Mom, I've been thinking. You know how handling the bills and accounts has been stressful for you? Maybe I can help you manage them officially. I found this form. It'll make things easier. You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at the stack in her hands. The top page was blank, waiting for my signature. She slid it toward me, her pen poised. "It's just paperwork. Nothing serious. Just to help me help you." I stared at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger, one with my blood in her veins but greed in her eyes. Instead of taking the pen, I smiled gently. "Leave it here. I'll look it over." Her smile faltered. "Mom, it's really simple. You can sign it now." I shook my head. Later, her eyes narrowed, just for a split second before she forced a laugh. "Sure, later then." She gathered the papers neatly and left them on the table. When she walked away, I picked them up and flipped through them. And there it was, buried among the lines of legal language. Power of attorney. Signing it would mean I was handing everything over to her. My throat tightened, but my eyes sharpened. She thought she was clever, but she had no idea how carefully I was watching. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the faint buzzing of her phone vibrating on the dresser. She was in the shower, and for the first time, she had left it behind. My hands shook as I picked it up. I knew her passcode. She had never changed it from the same 4 digits she'd used since she was a teenager. I unlocked it, my heart racing. Dozens of messages filled the screen, and my eyes widened as I read them. The man's name appeared again and again. Ethan. The messages were cold, calculated. Make her trust you. Play the good daughter. She mustn't suspect until it's too late. Once the papers are signed, we're free. But then one message caught my eye, one that made me sit down on the edge of the bed, my breath caught in my throat. "If this works, we'll finally have what your father always wanted." Father, my late husband, the man I had mourned for years. What did he have to do with this? I stared at the phone, confusion and dread swirling together. Had my husband been part of this plan long, before he died? Had my daughter been carrying out something darker, something I had never known? The shower stopped. I quickly placed the phone back and rushed to my bed, pretending to be asleep. My heart hammered in my chest as she walked into the room, humming softly, her footsteps light. She had no idea that her secret was unraveling in my hands. And now, not only did I know she was plotting against me, I had discovered that the roots of her betrayal went deeper than I ever imagined. I couldn't get that single line out of my head. What your father always wanted. Those words circled in my mind like a swarm of bees, stinging me every time I thought about them. My husband had been gone for over 10 years. I had cried myself to sleep countless nights after his death, believing he was a good man, a hard-working man who left us too soon. But now, for the first time, I questioned everything I had believed. The next morning, while my daughter was out, she said she was meeting Lisa again, though I doubted there even was a Lisa. I pulled out an old box from the attic. It was dusty, covered in the smell of time. Inside were photographs, letters, and documents I hadn't touched in years. My hands shook as I sifted through them, searching for any clue, anything that might explain why my daughter would use his name to justify her betrayal. I found old tax papers, insurance forms, even his driver's license. Nothing unusual. But then at the bottom, I found a bundle of sealed envelopes tied with rubber band. They weren't addressed to me. In fact, they weren't addressed at all. Some were open, some closed, but all of them contained financial statements, odd numbers scribbled on the corners, and strange names of companies I didn't recognize. One name appeared over and over, Brookvale Holdings. I frowned, whispering it to myself. I had never heard of it. Some papers showed deposits, others withdrawals. One even listed a property under that name. I stared at the dates. They were from years ago, back when my husband was alive. A sick feeling rose in my stomach. Had he been hiding money? Was there something he had kept from me all those years? My thoughts were interrupted when I heard the front door open. I shoved everything back into the box and slid it under the couch. Just as my daughter walked in, she glanced at me curiously, a shopping bag in her hand. "Have you been in the attic?" she asked suddenly, her eyes narrowing. I forced a laugh. "Of course not. Why would I? It's too dusty up there." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment before shrugging. I thought I heard something when I was leaving. Maybe it was just the wind. Her words were casual, but her eyes lingered on me too long, as if she suspected I was hiding something. I smiled faintly, but my chest felt heavy with unease. She was watching me just as much as I was watching her. Later that evening, as we sat in the living room, she suddenly asked, "Mom, do you ever think about Dad?" I blinked, startled. "Of course I do. Why?" She leaned back on the couch, her eyes distant. "Sometimes I wonder what he would have wanted for us. For me. The air between us felt thick. I wanted to ask her outright what she meant, but I held my tongue. Instead, I said softly, "Your father wanted you to be happy. That's all." She smiled faintly, but it wasn't the warm smile of a daughter. It was a sly, secretive curve of someone who knew more than she let on. That night, when she fell asleep, I retrieved the box again. I pulled out one of the open envelopes, this one with a letter inside. The handwriting was my husband's, neat but hurried. "Don't tell her yet. She wouldn't understand. Brookvale will secure our future. Once it's in her name, she won't question it. She trusts too much." I read the words again and again, my hands trembling. He had been talking about me. I was the one who trusted too much. My heart sank as I realized he had been planning something behind my back, something connected to this mysterious Brookvale. And now my daughter was carrying it out years later. The next day, I decided I needed answers. I went to the town library and sat at one of the old computers, typing Brookvale Holdings into the search bar. What came up made my stomach clench. Brookvale Holdings was a shell company, shut down years ago, but rumored to have been tied to fraudulent property deals and hidden accounts. There were lawsuits, arrests, whispers of stolen funds. My husband's name wasn't mentioned directly, but the dates lined up too perfectly with the time he used to come home late, smelling of whiskey and excuses. When I returned home, my daughter was waiting for me in the kitchen. "Where were you?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "At the library," I said, simply. Her eyebrows lifted. "Library? What for?" I forced a smile. "Just reading." She stared at me for a long moment, and then her lips curled into a smile. "You've been acting strange lately, Mom. Are you hiding something?" The irony of her question almost made me laugh. But instead, I shook my head. "Just tired. That's all." That night, I pretended to go to bed early. I heard her pacing in her room, then the creak of the stairs as she went down to the living room. I slipped out of bed quietly and followed her. From the shadows, I watched her pull the very same box from under the couch. My chest tightened. She knew. She opened the envelopes quickly, her hands moving with urgency, as if she were searching for something specific. Then, frustrated, she whispered into her phone, "I can't find the last letter. It has to be here. Without it, we don't have proof." Proof. My mind spun. Proof of what? The man's voice on the other end replied, "Keep looking. If she finds it first, everything will fall apart. That letter ties it all together." My daughter shoved the papers back into the box, muttering under her breath, and returned upstairs. I stayed hidden in the shadows until I was sure she was gone. Then I walked slowly to the box, my hands trembling. What was this last letter she was so desperate to find? Had I overlooked something? I spent the next hour searching through every paper, every envelope, until finally, tucked inside a folded newspaper, I found it. An old, yellowing piece of paper, written in my husband's unmistakable handwriting. "If anything happens to me, she must never know about Brookvale. But our daughter will. She'll finish what I started. She'll claim what belongs to us." I sank onto the floor, tears filling my eyes. So it was true. My husband had kept secrets from me all along. And my daughter, my only child, was carrying out his unfinished business, even if it meant destroying me in the process. The next morning, when I saw her smiling at me across the table, offering me toast, I felt a shiver run through me. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was her father's shadow. And the war between us had only just begun. The days that followed felt like I was living in two separate worlds. On the surface, I continued playing my role as a gentle, tired old mother, smiling faintly, nodding at her stories, thanking her for the coffee she made. But inside, I was sharpening myself, watching her every move, learning her rhythms. If she thought I was blind, I decided to let her think so, because nothing was more powerful than an enemy who underestimated you. One afternoon, she slid a stack of papers toward me again at the dining table. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Mom, I brought the final version of the form. I even filled out most of the sections for you, so you don't have to stress." I looked at her, my hands trembling faintly, and forced a weak smile. "You're so thoughtful, always looking after me." Her eyes gleamed at my words. "Of course, Mom. You know I only want the best for you." But beneath that softness, I caught a flash of impatience. She wanted this signed. Badly. I picked up the pen slowly, my hand hovering over the line. "Where exactly do I sign again?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Right there, Mom. The last page." I flipped the pages slowly, deliberately dragging my eyes across the paragraphs. I wasn't reading them, I already knew what they were. But I wanted her to squirm. Finally, I shook my head. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Maybe I should ask Mr. Harris to read it for me. He used to handle Dad's taxes, remember? Her face stiffened. Mom, that's not necessary. It's just routine paperwork. You don't need to drag outsiders into it. I set the pen down gently. Still, it might make me feel better. She forced a smile, but her jaw tightened. Fine. Whatever makes you comfortable. When she walked away, I saw her clench her fists at her sides. That small, bitter gesture told me everything. She was losing patience, and that made her dangerous. That night, I called Mr. Harris myself. He was older now, his voice shaky but still sharp. When I mentioned Brookvale Holdings, he went quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Where did you hear that name? My husband left behind some papers, and now my daughter is involved in something. Do you know what Brookvale was?" Mr. Harris sighed heavily. "Your husband invested in Brookvale years ago. He believed it would make him rich. But it was risky, illegal in many ways. He begged me not to tell you, said you wouldn't understand. When the company collapsed, I thought everything ended there. But if your daughter has those papers, she might try to resurrect the claim. There were hidden assets, properties under fake names. If she gains control, she could transfer them all legally if she tricks you into giving her power of attorney." My blood ran cold. Hidden assets, fake names, fraud. My husband hadn't just betrayed me in marriage. He had built a shadow life I knew nothing about. And now my daughter was planning to inherit it, even if it meant erasing me completely. When I hung up the phone, my hands shook so badly I had to press them to my chest. I felt grief, anger, shame, all tangled together. But beneath it all, I felt a strange new strength. If my husband had lived a lie, if my daughter was willing to destroy me for his legacy, then I had nothing left to protect but myself. The next morning, I changed my approach. I smiled at her more. I acted distracted, forgetful. I even pretended to misplace small things, my keys, my glasses, just to make her believe my mind was slipping. Each time she'd sigh, pat my hand, and say, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of everything soon." But when she wasn't looking, I was moving carefully. I made copies of every document I found in that attic box. I tucked them into a folder and slipped it under the floorboard in my bedroom, where she'd never think to look. I also began writing down dates, times, overheard conversations, building a quiet record of her betrayal. One evening, I noticed she left her handbag on the sofa. I pretended to be dusting, then carefully unzipped it when she went upstairs. Inside, I found more documents, property deeds, account numbers, even a fake ID with her picture, but another name, Claire Monroe. My breath caught. She was preparing to vanish, to build a new identity once everything was hers. That night, when she came to sit with me, I asked gently, "You've been busy these days. Is there something you're not telling me?" She looked startled, then laughed lightly. "Busy? No, Mom. Just taking care of things. You don't need to worry." But her laugh sounded hollow. The following weekend, another envelope arrived by mail. This one wasn't from the bank. It was from a law office I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a notice confirming that a hearing had been scheduled regarding the transfer of property assets. My property. My name was listed as the applicant, alongside hers, but I had never applied. My head spun. She had already taken the next step. If this hearing went through, she would have the law on her side. And if I opposed her, I'd need proof she had forged everything. That night, as she cooked dinner, I asked softly, "Did you get the mail today?" She froze, then smiled faintly. "No, why?" "Oh, just wondering." I slid the envelope into my pocket before she could see it. Her eyes flicked toward me briefly, sharp and calculating, but she said nothing. Later, I heard her on the phone again. "She hasn't signed yet, but don't worry. The court date is set. Even if she resists, we'll have enough to push it through. Once it's done, she won't be able to undo it." I held my breath, leaning against the wall. The man's voice replied, "Be careful. If she finds proof of forgery, you'll both be exposed. Remember what happened to your father. Don't repeat his mistake." Her voice grew colder. "I'm not him. I'll succeed." I slipped away, my chest pounding. Proof, that was the key. If I could gather enough evidence before the hearing, I could stop her. But how? The next day, I pretended to be frail, holding my back, and asking her for help with simple things. She fussed over me, clearly pleased at my dependence. But while she thought I was resting in bed, I slipped into her room. I searched quietly, my hands trembling, until I found a locked drawer. I forced it open with an old hairpin, and inside, I found a USB drive. I pocketed it quickly and returned to my room. That night, when she fell asleep, I plugged it into my laptop. Dozens of files appeared. Scans of forged signatures, false documents, even emails between her and Ethan. My heart pounded as I scrolled through them, my eyes widening. There were plans for multiple properties, bank accounts overseas, even instructions for transferring assets under the fake name Claire Monroe. But then, at the very bottom, I found a document that made my hands shake violently. It wasn't about me at all. It was about my late husband. It was a confession letter he had drafted but never sent. If she ever finds out, it will destroy her. But our daughter deserves the truth. Brookvale isn't just about money. It's about survival. The debts I owe, they won't stop after I'm gone. She will need to finish what I started, or they will come for her too. I sat back, my breath caught in my throat. Debts, enemies. Was this why he had done it all? Was my daughter trying to protect herself by finishing what he started? Or had greed blinded her so much she no longer cared about me at all? The next morning, as she served me breakfast, she smiled sweetly and said, "Don't worry, Mom. Soon, everything will be taken care of." I forced a smile in return, but inside I whispered to myself, "Yes, soon, everything will be taken care of, but not the way you think." Because now, I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was quietly becoming a hunter. The days that followed became a delicate dance between pretense and plotting. On the surface, I played my role so convincingly that even I sometimes wondered if I'd become that fragile, helpless woman my daughter believed me to be. I let her guide me by the arm. I let her pour my tea. I even let her fuss over me when I forgot where I had placed my medicine. Every sigh, every shaky hand, every "I'm too tired" was rehearsed, deliberate. She thought she was winning. But when she closed her door at night, I was wide awake, sorting through files, copying documents, and writing down notes in the margins of my old diary. Each page of that diary was becoming my weapon. Dates of phone calls, words I overheard, time she left, time she returned. And more importantly, each of her mistakes. One evening, I found her pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was sharp, impatient. "I told you, the court date is secure. Stop panicking. Once the assets are transferred, I'll wire your share. Just make sure no one links me back to the old Brookvale mess." My heart hammered as I listened from the shadow of the hallway. She wasn't working alone. Someone else, maybe Ethan, maybe another partner, was pulling strings with her. But then came the words that chilled me. "What about my mother? She won't be a problem. She's already half gone. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." Her laughter followed. A laughter so cruel, so alien, it stabbed deeper than any betrayal I'd ever felt. That night, I sat in my bed, tears burning my eyes, staring at the ceiling. But instead of breaking, something inside me hardened. If she wanted me weak, I would show her weakness. If she wanted me blind, I would close my eyes just enough to make her careless. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. I began with small gestures, asking her to help me with letters I pretended I couldn't read. She happily obliged, never realizing I was memorizing every word she spoke. Sometimes I would deliberately mishear her, asking her to repeat herself so I could confirm details. Then, one afternoon, while pretending to nap in the armchair, I overheard her on another call. This time, the name she spoke froze me. "Yes, Ethan, I know what I'm doing. She'll sign soon. Just be ready with the offshore account. Once the transfer is complete, we disappear. Claire Monroe will be the only name on those records. Ethan, her childhood friend. The boy who once sat at our dinner table, laughing with his mouth full of mashed potatoes, calling me Annie. And now, he was her co-conspirator. The betrayal cut deeper knowing she wasn't alone in this. I needed evidence that could not be denied. So, one evening, I faked a dizzy spell at dinner. She rushed to help me to bed, leaving her phone on the table. My hands trembled as I picked it up, quickly snapping pictures of her messages using my old phone hidden in my pocket. My heart pounded so loud, I thought she would hear it from upstairs, but she never suspected. Later that night, I looked through the photos. My eyes widened at the conversations. There were emails, legal drafts, even a scanned image of my signature, one I had never signed. She had been forging my hand. My stomach twisted with both rage and fear. But then a message appeared on the screen that made me freeze. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from someone else, an unknown number. The message read, "Don't forget your end of the deal. If you fail, both of us burn. Your father couldn't escape them, and neither will you." My blood turned cold. This wasn't just about greed. This was about danger. Enemies my husband had once owed, debts he had never repaid. Was my daughter truly betraying me, or was she cornered into continuing his sins? For a brief moment, doubt pierced me. What if she wasn't only cruel? What if she was also desperate? But then I remembered her laughter, her lies, her eagerness to erase me, and my resolve returned. Even if she had enemies, betraying me was still her choice. The next twist came unexpectedly. One morning, while my daughter was out, there was a knock at the door. I opened it slowly, expecting a delivery. Instead, I found a man in a dark coat, his eyes sharp and unsettling. "Mrs. Wilson?" he asked softly. "Yes." My voice trembled. He slipped a card into my hand. No name, no number, just a symbol, an emblem of a falcon. "Your daughter is playing a dangerous game. She thinks she can outsmart everyone, but debts like your husband's don't vanish. When the time comes, we'll collect." Before I could reply, he turned and walked away, vanishing down the street. I stood frozen in the doorway, the card trembling in my hand. Who were these people? Were they watching us? Watching her? Watching me? For the first time, I realized the danger wasn't only inside my home. It was circling us from the outside, too. That night, my daughter returned cheerful, humming as she cooked dinner. But when I looked at her, I no longer saw just betrayal. I saw someone being watched, manipulated, pushed toward choices she might not even control. But it didn't change the fact that she was willing to destroy me to save herself. Over dinner, she smiled at me sweetly. "Mom, you know, I've been thinking maybe we should take a trip together. Somewhere quiet. Just the two of us. Wouldn't that be nice?" My fork paused halfway to my lips. A trip? Somewhere quiet? My instinct screamed, but I smiled gently. "That sounds lovely, dear. Where are you thinking?" Her eyes flickered, calculating. "Somewhere near the coast. I'll make all the arrangements." I nodded, keeping my face calm, but inside my thoughts spun. Was this another scheme? To isolate me? Push me away from anyone who could help? If so, she was underestimating me again. Because by then, I already had enough evidence to raise questions in court. And if she wanted a trip, perhaps I could turn it into her trap instead. That night, I opened a hidden USB drive again, copying every file onto an old CD I labeled as family photos. I wrapped it carefully and addressed it to Mr. Harris with a note that read, "If anything happens to me, open this immediately." The next morning, I mailed it before she woke up. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of power return to me. She thought she was leading me into her carefully laid web, but I was already weaving a web of my own, one she wouldn't see until it was too late. As I sat back at the kitchen table, sipping my tea, I whispered to myself, "You've forgotten my daughter. You maybe play your father's game, but I was his wife. I know how liars breathe. I know how cheaters think, and I will not be your prey." And yet, even as I whispered those words, a knock came at the door again. This time it wasn't the man with the falcon card. It was Ethan, standing there, bold as ever, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Andy," he said warmly, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "I think it's time you," and I had a little chat. Alone. My pulse quickened, because in that moment I realized the real storm hadn't even begun. When Ethan stepped into the house, I felt the air change. His presence wasn't casual, wasn't friendly, despite the easy smile he plastered on his face. I had known him since he was a boy. I had watched him grow from an awkward teenager into the sharply dressed, ambitious man standing in my living room. But this man was not the boy who once called me Auntie. His eyes, cold and calculating, carried the weight of secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. He didn't wait for me to invite him to sit. He simply dropped into the armchair across from me, as though he owned the house. His hands were folded neatly, but his knee bounced slightly, a telltale sign of agitation. "You've been busy," he began, his voice smooth but laced with accusation. Too busy for someone who's supposed to be resting. I feigned confusion, tilting my head. "Busy? I don't know what you mean. My days are quiet. Tea, books, naps. Surely my daughter hasn't told you otherwise." His smile sharpened. "She told me you've been asking too many questions, poking around, maybe even snooping. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but I kept my face serene. Snooping? At my age, Ethan, I don't have energy for games. If I'm poking around, it's probably for my glasses. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Don't play dumb with me. I know you've seen things, heard things. And if you think you can run to some lawyer or judge, let me be clear. What you don't understand can kill you. The words hung in the air like smoke. My throat tightened, but I forced myself not to flinch. Instead, I leaned back as though unfazed. Threats don't suit you, Ethan. They make you look smaller, like a boy trying on his father's shoes. For the briefest second, his mask slipped, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. Then, just as quickly, the smile returned. You're clever, Andy, he said softly. Too clever for your own good. But let me tell you something you clearly don't know. Your husband wasn't the saint you believed. He owed money to the kind of people you don't cross. And when he died, those debts didn't vanish. They became transferable. Guess who's holding the debt now? His words cut through me like a blade. My husband's secrets, the debts, the dangers, they were real. And now my daughter was entangled in them. But Ethan wasn't finished. She's working with me because she has no choice. You think she's betraying you out of greed? No, Annie, she's trying to save herself. And maybe you... I searched his face, trying to pierce through the lies. But the more he spoke, the more tangled the truth became. If that's true, I said carefully, why forge my signature? Why try to take everything from me? His smirk widened. Because desperation breeds mistakes. She thinks controlling your estate will give her leverage. But really, none of this is about you. You're just collateral. If she doesn't deliver, the people I answered will bury us all. For a moment, silence stretched between us. I could hear the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall, each second like a hammer striking my nerves. Finally, I asked, So, what do you want from me, Ethan? His answer was chilling in its simplicity. Compliance. Play your role. Sign where you're told, and maybe you'll live out your days in peace. Refuse, and I can't guarantee your safety. I pretended to consider his words, letting the silence linger, but inside, a fire burned. He wanted me to bend, to surrender. He wanted me to accept that my fate lay in their hands. But what he didn't realize was that I was already laying traps, already preparing for a war they didn't see coming. So I offered him a small, trembling smile. I'm an old woman, Ethan. I want nothing but peace. If signing brings peace, perhaps I should think about it. He leaned back, satisfied. Good. That's the smart choice. But just before he left, he bent close, his breath hot against my ear. Don't test me, Annie. I know you better than you think. And I'll know if you try anything. The door closed behind him, and I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands shook, but not from fear, from fury. That night, as my daughter returned home, her face bright with false cheer, I watched her more carefully than ever. Was she a victim, or was she complicit? Was she being forced into this, or had she embraced it willingly? She kissed my cheek, set the table, and chatted about nonsense. But her eyes flickered with tension. She was hiding something, and she knew I knew it. Over dinner, she spoke suddenly. Ethan said he visited you today. I raised my brows innocently. Oh, did he? Such a polite young man. Her fork froze midair, suspicion flashing in her eyes. Then she laughed too quickly, brushing it off. But the seed of doubt was there. I had thrown her off balance. Later that week, the plans for the trip solidified. She bustled around, making phone calls, packing bags, humming cheerfully. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't a holiday. It was a move to isolate me, maybe even to make me vanish quietly. And yet I agreed. I smiled, I packed, I played along. Because sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to walk willingly into the forest and set the trap where they least expect it. The journey to the coast was long, the silence between us heavy. She tried to fill it with small talk, but I answered with vague nods, letting her stew in her own nervousness. When we arrived, the house she had rented was remote, surrounded by thick woods and the crashing waves of the sea. Too quiet, too perfect for secrets. That night, as the wind howled outside, I heard her pacing the hall. My door creaked open slightly. I closed my eyes, feigning sleep as her shadow fell across me. For a long moment, she stood there, breathing softly. Then she whispered something I almost didn't catch. I'm sorry, Mom. It has to be this way. My heart clenched. She left, closing the door softly behind her. The next morning, I discovered something that twisted the knife even deeper. In the drawer of the rented kitchen, beneath a stack of old menus, I found a folded piece of paper. It wasn't meant for me. It was a letter addressed to Ethan in my daughter's handwriting. Once it's done, you'll get what you want. But don't ever think I'll be under your thumb forever. I'll pay them. I'll give them my mother. But then we're finished. This is my life now, and I won't be anyone's puppet. Tears blurred my vision as I read the words. She wasn't only betraying me to survive. She was planning to outsmart Ethan too. She was carving her own path, cold and ruthless, determined to rise above everyone, no matter the cost. The daughter I once cradled, the girl who once clung to me when storms frightened her, she was gone. In her place stood a woman I barely recognized. And yet, even as pain seared through me, my mind sharpened. If she was planning to betray Ethan as well, then cracks were already forming in their alliance. Cracks I could exploit that night. As the sea roared outside and the storm clouds gathered, I sat by the window, formulating my next move. She thought she was playing Ethan. Ethan thought he was controlling her, and both of them thought I was their pawn. But what neither realized was that I was watching, listening, and waiting. And when the time came, I would turn their game upside down. The storm outside intensified. The house creaked under the weight of the wind. And somewhere down the hall, I heard my daughter's voice, low, urgent, on the phone again. "No, I told you. It'll happen soon. By tomorrow night. She won't be a problem anymore." Lightning flashed, illuminating my reflection in the glass. My own face looked back at me, tired but resolute. Tomorrow night, that gave me one day. One day to turn her trap into my victory. And as the thunder rolled across the dark horizon, I whispered to myself, "You underestimated me, my child. You've forgotten who taught you to survive storms." The night after I overheard her whispering, I barely slept. Every time the wind rattled the old house, I jolted awake, thinking it was her creeping into my room with poison or a pillow. I lay still, my eyes fixed on the dark ceiling, my thoughts moving faster than the storm outside. She had given me a deadline without realizing it. Tomorrow night. That meant tonight was my last chance to prepare. By morning, I felt weak in body but razor sharp in mind. I forced myself to move slowly to keep up the performance of frailty. She watched me closely over breakfast, as if she were studying every bite of bread, every sip of tea, judging whether I was healthy enough or sick enough for what she had planned. Her face was the picture of warmth, but I noticed her hands. They trembled ever so slightly when she poured the tea. It wasn't nerves, it was calculation. She was already imagining the end, already rehearsing it in her mind. I wonder if she had chosen poison, an accident, or perhaps a staged fall near the cliff where the sea swallowed everything without a trace. The thought chilled me, but I forced myself to smile at her. "The sea is beautiful," I said, gazing out the window at the restless waves. "I think I'll walk the cliffs this afternoon. It's good to breathe the salty air while I still can." She froze for a moment, then recovered quickly. "Yes, of course, Mom. That's a wonderful idea." But her eyes betrayed her. She hadn't planned for me to suggest my own grave. I spent the day moving through the house as though I were a curious old woman, bored with too much time. In truth, I was mapping every exit, every creak of the floorboards, every tool that could be a weapon. The kitchen knives were sharp but too obvious. The fireplace poker, better. Heavy, inconspicuous. In the study, I found an old writing desk. Inside, tucked behind yellowed envelopes, was a stack of receipts, dated only weeks ago. Gasoline, rope, a tarp, not purchases an innocent woman makes before inviting her mother to the coast. I replaced everything exactly as I found it. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the thrill of knowing I had proof. She thought she was clever, but she had left a trail. And trails, if followed carefully, lead straight to the heart of the trap. That evening, just before dinner, there was a knock at the door. My daughter startled, her face paling for a fraction of a second before she composed herself. When she opened it, Ethan walked in as if the house belonged to him. He greeted me with the same false charm, kissing my hand and calling me Dear Annie, but his eyes scanned the room like a predator. He hadn't come for pleasantries. He had come to confirm progress. Over dinner, the tension was unbearable. My daughter kept smiling, her laughter brittle, while Ethan's gaze never left her face. He asked pointed questions, each one sharper than the last. "So, when exactly will you be free of obligations?" he asked casually, swirling the wine in his glass. "Soon," she answered too quickly. "By tomorrow night." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Ethan leaned back, satisfied, but I noticed a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He didn't trust her. I took a sip of my tea and smiled faintly. "Tomorrow night sounds ominous," I said softly, like something from a story where someone doesn't come back. Both of them froze. For a heartbeat, silence pressed against the walls. Then my daughter laughed nervously. "Mother, you always say the strangest things." But Ethan's gaze lingered on me, thoughtful, as if he suspected I knew more than I should. Later, when she was in the kitchen, I found my chance. Ethan lingered in the sitting room, pretending to admire the old paintings on the wall. I joined him, lowering my voice so she wouldn't hear. "She's planning to betray you," I whispered. His head snapped toward me, his jaw tightening. "What did you say?" "She's written letters." I continued. "She's planning to give you what you want, then cut ties. She thinks once I'm gone, she won't need you anymore." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. His eyes bored into mine, searching for lies. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, cold and deadly. "You really are clever, Andy," he murmured. "Clever enough to survive." "Maybe." Before I could reply, my daughter returned with dessert, her cheerfulness forced but convincing. Ethan masked his expression instantly, but I knew my words had landed like a seed in his mind. And seeds, once planted, grow into suspicion. That night, the house was alive with silence. My daughter pretended to read in the study, but I saw her eyes flick toward the clock every few minutes. Ethan claimed he had business in town and left, though I suspected he'd circle back like a wolf in the dark, waiting for weakness. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard the softest creak outside my door. I closed my eyes, breathing evenly, pretending to sleep. The handle turned slowly, carefully. My daughter stepped inside, her shadow spilling across the floor. She carried a glass of water. She set it gently on the bedside table. For a long moment, she stood there watching me. Her breathing was shallow, shaky. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Forgive me, Mom." She left the room, closing the door with a quiet click. I opened my eyes and stared at the glass. The water was clear, but I could smell something faint, bitter. Not poison meant to kill quickly. Something slower, quieter. Enough to weaken me, confuse me, make me stumble off a cliff when the time came. I didn't touch it. Instead, I left it exactly where she placed it. Proof. Evidence. A trap within a trap. By dawn, I had made my decision. If she wanted me gone by tomorrow night, then tonight, I would act. But not recklessly. No. I would weave my moves carefully, drawing Ethan deeper into suspicion, turning daughter against ally, until neither knew who to trust. Over breakfast, I acted weaker than usual, clutching the table for support, letting my voice tremble. My daughter's eyes lit up with a flicker of triumph she couldn't hide. She thought her plan was working. But later, when she stepped outside to take a call, I picked up the glass of poisoned water and carried it to Ethan's car, which he had left parked near the trees. I left it on his seat with a note in her handwriting, the one I had carefully copied the night before. "This will finish her by tonight. Be patient." When Ethan returned later, I watched in the window as he slid into his car. I saw his expression shift when he found a glass and a note. Suspicion, anger, calculation. The first crack had widened into a fracture. That evening, the storm returned, raging harder than before. The house shook, the sea roared, and inside, 3 players circled one another like predators in a cage. My daughter was restless, pacing, her eyes darting to me, then to the clock. Ethan sat calmly, sipping his drink, but I could see the fury simmering beneath his stillness. And I sat quietly, knitting in my lap, as though I were blind to the storm around me. But I wasn't blind. I was waiting, because by tonight, one of them would make their move. And when they did, I would be ready. The storm that evening was unlike anything I had seen in years. The wind howled through the cracks of the old house, as though the sea itself was trying to claw its way inside. The walls groaned, the shutters slammed, and the lamps flickered under the strain of lightning. It was a kind of storm that made time feel unmoored, as if midnight and morning had blurred into one endless, dangerous moment. I sat in the armchair near the fireplace, the needles of my knitting clicking softly. The rhythm calmed me, though my mind was anything but calm. Across the room, my daughter paced like a restless animal. Every few steps, she'd stop at the window, peer into the raging dark, and then glance at the clock. She was waiting, perhaps for the poison to do its work. perhaps for Ethan to return, or perhaps simply for her own courage to rise high enough to strike. Ethan sat across from her, uncharacteristically quiet. He sipped his whiskey with an almost ceremonial slowness, his eyes never leaving her face. The note I had planted in his car was working on him like a parasite, feeding doubt into his veins with every heartbeat. His jaw was tense, his smile brittle, and I could feel the weight of his suspicion growing heavier by the minute. My daughter must have felt it too, because she finally broke the silence. "You're very quiet tonight," she said, her voice too light, too careful. Ethan tilted his head slightly, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Just watching," he said. "It's fascinating to see how people behave when they know the end is near." Her hands tightened into fists, though she tried to hide it by folding her arms. "You talk in riddles," she said coldly. "I prefer truths," Ethan replied, "even if they sting." I lowered my eyes to my knitting, hiding the smile tugging at my lips. The fracture between them was widening beautifully. Hours stretched on, the storm battering the house with unrelenting fury. The power cut out, plunging us into darkness except for the flickering fire. My daughter lit candles, her hands trembling slightly as the shadows leapt across the walls, making the house feel even older, even more haunted by the weight of what we were all carrying. At some point, I excused myself and went upstairs, but I did not go to bed. Instead, I walked quietly to the study, where I had discovered the receipts earlier. My candlelight revealed something I had missed before, a small locked drawer in the desk. The key, I discovered after some fumbling, was hidden under the carpet beneath the chair. My daughter thought she was clever, but she had inherited her cunning from me. She had forgotten I taught her every trick she knew. Inside the drawer was a bundle of documents, meticulously organized. Property deeds, insurance papers, even a forged will with my name on it. According to that paper, I had left everything to her. The handwriting was shockingly accurate. She had clearly practiced, or perhaps even traced my signature. But that wasn't the worst of it. Beneath the will was a series of photographs, old, grainy, but unmistakable. Ethan, my daughter, and a third man I did not recognize, standing in front of a car with the same gasoline cans I had seen on the receipts. In one photo, Ethan held a lighter. In another, my daughter looked directly at the camera with a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was bigger. Whatever they had planned went beyond me, beyond family. There was another layer here, one I hadn't yet uncovered. I tucked the documents back into place, locked the drawer, and replaced the key. My mind spun with the implications. Who was the third man? What did the gasoline mean? An accident? An arson? A cover-up? And why had she hidden this from Ethan? Or had she? When I returned downstairs, Ethan's eyes snapped to me instantly. My daughter followed, her expression carefully neutral, but her fingers tapped nervously against her thigh. They both wanted to know where I had gone, what I had seen, but neither dared ask. Instead, Ethan leaned forward, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "Tell me, Annie, do you trust your daughter?" The question was a blade. My daughter stiffened, her eyes widening for the briefest moment before narrowing into slits. She turned on him with venom. "What are you trying to do?" she hissed. "Nothing," Ethan said with a shrug, though his gaze stayed on me. "Just curious. Families are complicated. Loyalty doesn't always run where you think it does." She laughed bitterly. "You're paranoid. And you're nervous," Ethan shot back. Their words clashed in the air like swords. I let them fight, my silence fueling their unease. The storm outside screamed louder, as though urging them to rip each other apart. Near midnight, when the storm reached its peak, I slipped away again, moving with the careful quiet of someone who had lived long in a house full of secrets. I went to the kitchen, not for food, but for a tool. Something small, unremarkable, yet effective. My hand settled on the corkscrew, a simple spiral of steel, sharp enough to pierce. I tucked it into my sleeve, hidden but ready. As I turned to leave, I heard voices, low, hurried, coming from the pantry door. I crept closer, careful not to be seen. "She's slowing down," my daughter whispered. "By tomorrow, she'll be too weak to fight." "She's not as weak as you think," Ethan replied, his tone dark. "And if you're lying to me, if you're planning to cut me out—" "I'm not," she snapped, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. I'm risking everything. She's my mother." There was a long pause. Then Ethan said, almost gently, "Then prove it. Tonight, end it while she sleeps. Or I'll end you instead." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. I stepped back, my pulse thundering. They were no longer allies. They were adversaries bound together by greed and mistrust, and I was the thread that could unravel them both. I returned to the sitting room before they noticed my absence. When they came back moments later, their faces were masks, but their eyes betrayed the war brewing between them. The rest of the night passed in taut silence. I pretended to doze in the armchair, but inside, I was wide awake, listening, waiting. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of the candle, every shift in their breathing sharpened my awareness. At one point, Ethan leaned close to her and whispered something I couldn't catch. She flinched as though struck, then forced a smile. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but the gesture felt more like a warning than affection. When dawn finally broke, the storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with damp salt and the scent of earth. The house was eerily still, as though holding its breath. But I knew this calm was a lie. The real storm was only just beginning. The morning after the storm felt unreal, as though the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath all night. The sea outside was calmer, but its rhythm was deceptive. The waves crashed with steady violence, as if reminding me that storms never truly end, they only change form. The silence inside was worse than the chaos of the night. Ethan had risen early, his boots echoing on the wooden floors as he prowled the house. My daughter lingered in the kitchen, her movements sharp, distracted, like someone rehearsing a lie too many times. I stayed in my chair by the window, the corkscrew hidden still within my sleeve, watching them without watching them. I knew they were both waiting for weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But neither had the courage to act yet. Fear was gnawing at them, and fear makes people sloppy. It was nearly midday when a sharp knock rattled the front door. All three of us froze. Visitors were rare, especially during storms. Ethan was the first to move, his hand brushing instinctively against his jacket pocket, where I suspected a knife or pistol might be hidden. When he opened the door, the wind carried in a spray of salt, and the figure of a man I had never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his rain-soaked coat clinging to him. His eyes were sharp, too sharp, and when they landed on me, something flickered recognition. Perhaps morning, the stranger said, his voice low, controlled. I'm looking for Miss Eleanor. My daughter stiffened. She rarely used her full name anymore. Only officials, bankers, or conspirators addressed her that way. She stepped forward, forcing a smile. I'm Eleanor. And you are... The man removed his hat, shaking off droplets of rain. Just a courier. I have something for you. From inside his coat, he produced a small envelope, sealed with red wax. My daughter hesitated before taking it, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. Ethan watched with narrowed eyes, his jaw twitching. I leaned back, feigning disinterest, but every nerve in me was taut. The courier's gaze drifted once more to me before he nodded and left without another word. The moment the door closed, Ethan snatched the envelope from her hand. She protested, but he tore it open anyway. Inside was a single piece of paper with only a few words written in bold black ink. She knows. Move faster. The blood drained from my daughter's face. She tried to laugh it off, to dismiss it as nonsense, but Ethan wasn't fooled. His grip on her arm was iron, his voice a low growl. Who sent this? Who else is involved? She stammered, her lies weak and unconvincing. I watched the cracks spread wider between them, the poison of mistrust eating away at whatever fragile alliance they still had. But what unsettled me most was the note itself. She knows. Was it about me? Or was there someone else, another shadow moving behind us, pulling strings we couldn't see? That night, as the candles burned low and the sea whispered against the cliffs, I crept once more to the study. My hand shook not from fear, but from the weight of what I might find. I had to know if there were more secrets buried in this house. I searched deeper, pulling out drawers, checking behind portraits, lifting loose floorboards. Hours passed in silence until, at last, my fingers brushed against a leather-bound ledger tucked inside the wall cavity behind the bookshelf. I opened it and my breath caught. The pages were filled with names, dates, and numbers, meticulous records of transactions, some stretching back years. Payments received, shipments arranged, coded references to things that made my skin crawl. Gasoline, chemicals, offshore accounts. This wasn't just greed. This was a network, a machinery of crime, and my daughter was right in the middle of it. One entry in particular froze me. August 17th, payment confirmed. Insurance fire scheduled. Target, Blackthorn Estate. Blackthorn Estate. My home. My legacy. They weren't just planning to poison me quietly. They wanted to erase everything. burn it down, and collect the ashes like vultures picking at bone. I clutched the ledger to my chest, my pulse hammering. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was annihilation. When I returned downstairs, they were waiting. My daughter's eyes flicked the book in my hands, and for the first time, she looked truly afraid. Ethan stood beside her, silent but deadly, like a predator about to pounce. "What's that?" my daughter demanded, her voice too shrill, too quick. "Just something I found," I said calmly, setting the ledger on the table. "Care to explain?" She opened her mouth, but Ethan was faster. He grabbed the book, flipped through the pages, and then turned on her with a fury that shook even me. "You lied," he snarled. "You told me it was just about her will. You didn't tell me about this. You were going to cut me out. Again." "I wasn't," she cried, though her voice cracked with guilt. "I swear, Ethan, He slammed the ledger shut, his face twisted with rage. "I should kill you right now." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. My daughter crumpled into tears, begging, pleading, swearing loyalty. Ethan's hand hovered near his pocket, but he didn't draw his weapon. Not yet. And I sat back, silent, letting them tear each other apart. The more they fought, the weaker they became. But there was another twist, one neither of them expected. Later, after the shouting died down and Ethan stormed out into the rain to clear his head, my daughter approached me. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her voice hoarse, but there was a new edge in her tone, desperation laced with something like sincerity. "Mother," she whispered, gripping my hands, "you don't understand. Ethan isn't who you think he is. He's worse. He's dangerous. You have to trust me. We can stop him together." I searched her face, trying to read the truth in her trembling eyes. Was this genuine fear, or just another manipulation, another mask in her endless theater of lies? Before I could answer, she leaned closer and said something that made my blood run cold. "He killed Father. It wasn't an accident. He set it up, and now he's going to do the same to you." The room seemed to tilt. My daughter, for all her wickedness, had never mentioned her father's death before. Not like this. If what she said was true, then Ethan was not just a partner in her crimes. He was the architect of something far darker. But even as the weight of her words sank into me, I saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes. She wanted me to side with her. She wanted me to choose her over him. The question was, which snake was deadlier? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while the house creaked around me. Ethan had not returned. My daughter slept restlessly in her room, whimpering like a child caught in nightmares. I held the corkscrew in one hand and the ledger in the other, knowing both were weapons in their own right. And I realized something crucial. I was no longer simply surviving their schemes. I was part of the game now. A player, not a victim. The only question that remained was who I would sacrifice first. The following morning dawned with strange, heavy stillness, as though the sea itself had paused to listen. The storm had passed, leaving behind skies painted with streaks of gray and gold, but the house seemed locked in a darker weather of its own. I hadn't slept. My mind circled endlessly around my daughter's whispered confession. Ethan killed her father. The words haunted me like a curse. If they were true, then I had shared my roof, my table, and even my silence with the very man who had orchestrated the destruction of the one person I once trusted. But if it was a lie, and I knew my daughter's tongue was skilled in deception, then she had chosen her weapon with surgical precision, stabbing me at the softest part of my heart. The question gnawed at me. What was truth and what was theater? Ethan did not return until noon. When he finally came to the door, his clothes were soaked, his face pale with fury and exhaustion. He ignored both of us, stomping upstairs without a word, but I could hear the weight of his boots in every step, like war drums echoing through the house. My daughter followed him with her eyes, her lips pressed tight, then turned to me. "You see," she hissed, "he's unraveling. He's dangerous. We need to act before he does." I said nothing. Silence was my shield, my greatest weapon. People reveal more when they're desperate to fill the void. And she did. She leaned close, lowering her voice until it was barely audible. "Mother, there's something else. Something I never told him. You remember Father's accident at the docks? The fire? They said it was faulty wiring. That was Ethan. He set the blaze, then made it look like Father's negligence. He wanted the insurance money, but when Father confronted him, he made sure Father didn't walk away." Her voice trembled, but her eyes gleamed with something colder. Triumph, maybe, at finally spilling the secret she had carried. "I stayed quiet," she whispered, "because I thought I could control him. But I was wrong. He's controlling me. And if you don't help me stop him, he'll take everything from both of us. Her hands clutched mine, fragile yet suffocating. I pulled away slowly, my gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. If what she said was true, then my husband's death was not the tragic accident I had mourned. It was murder, and the man upstairs was a murderer. But again, what if it was another manipulation? A lie planted to drive a wedge between us, to make me her ally in this silent war. I felt myself teetering on the edge of madness, unable to trust even my own memories. That night, I decided to find proof. Words meant nothing. Only evidence could cut through the web of lies. When the house finally sank into silence, my daughter asleep in her room, Ethan brooding upstairs, I crept to the cellar. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of mildew and rust. The flickering lantern cast monstrous shadows across the walls as I searched through crates and cabinets. At first, I found nothing but dust and forgotten tools. But then, behind a row of old wine bottles, I discovered a locked metal box, its surface scarred with age. My fingers trembled as I pried it open with a corkscrew I carried like a talisman. Inside lay a bundle of documents, brittle with time, contracts, insurance policies, receipts for shipments, and tucked among them, a charred photograph of my husband, his face half burned away, the edges blackened with soot. Beneath the photo was a letter written in my husband's handwriting. The words were jagged, rushed, as though scrawled in desperation. If anything happens to me, it will be Ethan. He is not what he pretends. Eleanor knows, but she will not act. Protect yourself. The lantern nearly slipped from my hands. My breath caught in my throat. Here was proof, not just of Ethan's guilt, but my daughter's complicity. She had known all along. She had watched her father die and said nothing. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. When I returned upstairs, dawn was breaking. I found Ethan sitting at the table, his eyes hollow, his hands wrapped around a glass of untouched whiskey. He looked up at me, and for the first time, there was no mask, no arrogance, just weariness. "She's told you, hasn't she?" he muttered. I froze. He gave a bitter laugh. "About your husband, about me, she never could keep her secrets for long." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "But did she tell you the whole story?" "No, of course not. She wouldn't. She wants you to believe she's innocent, that she's the victim. But she's the one who wanted him gone." His eyes lifted to mine, dark and unwavering. It was her idea. She came to me, said her father stood in the way, that she'd never inherit while he lived. I was young, stupid, easy to manipulate. She promised me wealth, promised me freedom. I believed her. I did the fire because she asked. But when it was done, she stood there and let me take the blame. And now she's doing the same to you. His words were poison, each syllable crafted to pierce. I felt the floor sway beneath me. Could it be true? Was my daughter not just complicit, but the instigator? The letter in my pocket said otherwise, but letters can be forged. Photographs can be planted. Lies can be dressed as truth until they bleed. I wanted to scream, to demand clarity, but I remained silent. I studied Ethan's face, the lines of bitterness etched into it, the weary hatred that seemed to consume him. "Think about it," he said softly. "She's been grooming you all along. Playing weak, playing scared. She wants you to see me as the monster, so she can finish what she started years ago. And when I'm gone, you'll be next. Later." I retreated to my room, clutching corkscrew like a crucifix warding off evil. The house seemed alive with whispers, the walls pulsing with secrets. My daughter's sobs echoed faintly through the floorboards, though whether they were genuine grief or rehearsed performance, I couldn't tell. I laid out everything I had: the ledger, the photograph, the letter, Ethan's words. 4 versions of the same story, each pointing fingers, each dripping with betrayal. My mind fractured under the weight of it. Who was the true villain? My daughter, with her crocodile tears and sharpened lies? Or Ethan, the man who had fire in his hands and ashes in his wake? Or was it both? 2 devils circling me, waiting to see which one I'd sacrifice first? The worst part was a possibility that neither had lied completely. Perhaps they were both telling half-truths, twisting reality until it became unrecognizable. Perhaps my husband's death was not the result of one betrayal, but of 2. And if that was the case, then I was not facing a snake pit. I was trapped in a nest of vipers. The next evening, as the last light faded, I heard them, my daughter and Ethan, speaking in hushed, urgent tones in the parlor. I crept closer, pressing myself against the wall. straining to catch their words. "Can't keep dragging this out," Ethan was saying. "She's onto us. The longer we wait, the worse it gets. She doesn't know everything." My daughter hissed back. "Not yet, but if you move too soon, she'll see through you." "She already has," he snapped. "You've lost control of her, just like you lost control of me." Silence. Then my daughter's voice, cold as steel. "If you ever breathe a word about father, I'll slit your throat myself." The sound of a glass shattering followed. I stumbled back from the wall, my heart hammering. Their alliance was fractured beyond repair. They no longer trusted each other, and both were willing to kill to protect their lives. And I was the last piece of their puzzle. The prize. The target. I realized then that survival alone was no longer enough. If I wanted to live, I had to choose. Align with one snake to kill the other, or strike them both down before they devoured me. But even as I steeled myself, a new thought crept in, darker than all the rest. What if I could pit them against each other so completely that neither survived? The following days unfolded like a play in which every actor had forgotten their lines, yet continued improvising with venom. The house no longer felt like a home. It was a stage where lies were rehearsed, whispered confessions were traded like poison gifts, and silence itself became a blade. I moved through it carefully, like a shadow, listening, watching, calculating. I had decided I would not trust either of them. Not my daughter with her trembling hands and tear-stained cheeks, nor Ethan with his weary confessions and hollow eyes. Both had proven their talent for deceit. Instead, I would let them destroy each other, piece by piece, word by word. My role would be to feed the fire when it began to die. But what I hadn't expected was how quickly their masks would slip. On the third evening, I found my daughter in the kitchen, staring at a knife that gleamed beneath the dim lantern light. She didn't hear me approach at first. Her lips moved soundlessly, as though reciting a prayer or a curse. When she finally noticed me, she flinched, shoving the blade back into its sheath. "Mother," she whispered, her face a portrait of innocence. "I'm afraid of him. He's planning something. I heard him talking to someone in town. Someone about finishing the job. You must believe me." Her hands clutched at mine, soft and warm, but I felt the cold metal of the knife still imprinted on her palms. I studied her for a long moment. "And what job would that be?" I asked. Her eyes darted away. "You know, the same job he began years ago. The fire. Father, he won't stop until we're both out of the way." Her voice cracked, and tears spilled freely. But I noticed how easily they came, how practiced the sobs sounded. She was not merely a frightened daughter. She was an actress rehearsing her most important role. I left her there in the kitchen, her tears still glistening, but my mind was already turning toward Ethan. If she had spoken the truth, he would reveal it in his impatience. Later that night, I found Ethan outside on the porch, smoking a cigarette while staring into the dark stretch of sea. The smoke curled around him like a shroud. "She told you something, didn't she?" he said without turning. I didn't answer. He exhaled slowly, then flipped the cigarette into the waves. "Of course she did. She always runs to you when she feels me slipping away. What was it this time? That I'm plotting against you? That I'm planning another fire?" The words froze in my chest. He had named it exactly, as though he'd overheard her every syllable. He turned then, his face pale, his expression unreadable. "She wants you to fear me. She wants you to see me as a beast, so that when she finally strikes, you'll thank her for saving you." "Strikes?" I asked softly. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't know her the way I do. You see a daughter. I see the woman who coaxed me into murder and laughed while the flames devoured her father. She doesn't want freedom. She wants power. And when she's done, she'll stand over both of our graves and call it justice." His words clawed at me. I wanted to dismiss them, to hold fast to some thread of truth. But the more he spoke, the more it tangled with what I already knew. Could my daughter, my own flesh and blood, be the puppeteer all along? But even as I questioned, I remembered the letter in my pocket, my husband's desperate scrawl. "Eleanor knows, but she will not act." It was undeniable. Both stories contained fragments of truth. The problem was knowing which fragments belonged to which liar. The turning point came 2 nights later. I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my room, light, careful, deliberate. I held my breath, clutching corkscrew under my pillow, listening as the steps paused just outside my door. Then came the faint scrape of metal against the lock. My heart thundered. Someone was trying to enter. I sat up, ready to defend myself, but then silence. The footsteps retreated. When morning came, I searched the hallway. On the wooden floor, faint but undeniable, was a small glint of steel, a broken shard of a knife tip. I tucked it into my pocket. Neither of them would know I had found it. That evening, I decided to turn the game. At dinner, I placed a shard of steel between us on the table. Neither spoke at first, but I watched their faces closely. My daughter's eyes widened, flicking nervously toward Ethan. Ethan's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. Strange, I said casually. I found this outside my door last night. Perhaps one of you can explain. The silence was suffocating. Then, almost simultaneously, they turned on each other. She planted it. My daughter cried, her voice trembling. She wants to frame me, to make you think I tried to hurt her. Ethan slammed his hand against the table. Liar. She's the one who sneaks through the halls at night, knife in hand. She tried to kill you, and now she wants to hide it behind tears. The two of them shouted over each other, their voices echoing off the walls, venom spilling freely. Every accusation revealed another layer of rot. Secret meetings, whispered threats, plans half executed and abandoned. They were unraveling before me, exposing wounds they had tried so hard to bandage. And all the while, I sat in silence, feeding the fire with nothing more than a raised brow, a quiet glance, a pointed question. But the most chilling twist came not from their lips, but from a discovery I made later that night. Unable to sleep, I wandered back to the cellar, lantern in hand. My eyes scanned the shadows until they caught on something I hadn't noticed before, a loose stone in the wall. Curiosity pried it open. Behind it was a small hidden compartment, and inside, another bundle of letters. These, however, were not for my husband. They were for my daughter. The handwriting was unmistakable. The letters were addressed to Ethan, filled with fiery words of ambition and contempt. She spoke of her father as an obstacle, of me as a fading relic, of a future that would be theirs once the old ties were cut. In one, she wrote plainly, when the fire is done, we'll finally be free. Father will burn, mother will break, and no one will stand in our way. My hands shook as I read. Here was the missing piece, the link that bound their stories together. My daughter had indeed conspired with Ethan. She had planned the fire, had orchestrated my husband's death, but she had also written of betraying Ethan once his usefulness was over. The serpent had two heads, each ready to bite the other. The house had become a prison of whispers, knives, and shadows. For nights I played along, pretending to doubt, pretending to choose one side over the other, while secretly waiting for the moment when both of them would reveal their true faces. But fate, it seemed, was impatient. On the seventh night, a storm broke over the coast. Thunder rolled across the black sky. Rain hammered the roof, and the sea howled like a wounded beast. I sat in the parlor with a single lantern, the bundle of secret letters hidden beneath my chair. Then, the door creaked open. My daughter entered, her hair damp from the rain, her face pale but determined. She carried the kitchen knife in her hand. "Mother," she whispered, "it ends tonight. He's asleep. We can finish this before he wakes." Her eyes gleamed, not with fear but with hunger. Before I could answer, another shadow filled the doorway. Ethan. His coat was soaked, his boots dripping on the floor, but in his hand was a revolver I had seen hidden in the cellar chest. "I knew it," he said softly, almost with admiration. "You couldn't wait, could you? You always wanted to cut her throat before I claimed her loyalty." The three of us stood in silence, the storm raging outside, the lantern flickering between us, steel and gunmetal glinting in the light. I rose slowly, clutching the bundle of letters. "Enough," I said, my voice steady. "I know everything. Both of you." I dropped the letters onto the table. Pages spilled open, exposing my daughter's handwriting, her promises to Ethan, her plan to betray him. Her face drained of color. Ethan's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You see," he sneered, "your precious daughter wanted me to kill your husband. She wanted you broken. And now she wants me gone as well." "No," she screamed, pointing the knife at him. "You were the one who set the fire. You used me, tricked me." "Liar," Ethan roared, raising the revolver. And then I understood the only truth that mattered. Neither of them loved me. Neither of them would stop until the other was dead, and I with them. So I made my choice. As Ethan aimed at my daughter, I lunged forward, shoving the lantern onto the table. Flames leapt instantly, devouring the letters, the wood, the drapes. Smoke filled the air. In the chaos, my daughter screamed and rushed at Ethan. He fired, once, twice, the shots lost in thunder. She collapsed, blood spilling across the floor. But before he could turn the gun on me, the fire roared between us, cutting him off. His face twisted in shock as the ceiling groaned, timbers cracking above him. Then the roof gave way. Flames swallowed him whole. I stumbled out into the storm, the burning house collapsing behind me, the screams of my daughter, and Ethan mingling with the crackle of fire and the crash of thunder. The sea wind lashed my face, rain soaking me to the bone. I stood there, alone, watching the home that had held my past, my lies, and my family turn to ash. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Because in the end, I had not chosen between them. I had chosen myself.